This is a video on the ratio test. The question states, determine if the series converges or diverges. We have the sum from n equals 1 to infinity of negative 1 to the n times 2n factorial divided by n factorial times 2 to the n. When I have factorials and powers, the ratio test is a test to use. So the ratio test is I look at the terms, and the first thing is I take an absolute value, which gets rid of the negative 1 to the n power, and then I plug in n plus 1 for n by doing 2 times n plus 1 factorial over n plus 1 factorial times 2 to the n plus 1, and divide that by the term with just the n, 2n factorial over n factorial 2 to the n, and I take a limit as n approaches infinity. So dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So next what I do is I regroup the factors. So I have a 2 times n plus 1 factorial over a 2n factorial, and I can multiply the 2 through, and I get 2n plus 2 quantity factorial over 2n factorial. Then I have an n factorial over n plus 1 factorial, and a 2 to the n over 2 to the n plus 1. Now let's simplify each of these. Let's look at the 2n plus 2 factorial and the 2n factorial. Well, the 2n factorial multiplies all the numbers from 2n all the way down to 1. The 2n plus 2 factorial has all of those factors, but it also has 2n plus 2 and 2n plus 1. So everything cancels below 2n plus 1, and we're going to be left with 2n plus 2 times 2n plus 1. Also, the n factorial over n plus 1 factorial, again, everything cancels except for the n plus 1 in the denominator. The n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 all the way to 2, all those cancel. Also, 2 to the n over 2 to the n plus 1, that's just 1/2. So I'm just left with 2n plus 2 times 2n plus 1 over n plus 1 times 2. But check this out. N plus 1 times 2 is 2n plus 2. So our 2n plus 2's cancel, and I'm left with the limit as n approaches infinity of 2n plus 1. Now if I plug in n equals infinity, that's 2 times infinity plus 1, and that just goes to infinity. And with the ratio test, I'm comparing with 1. Well, infinity is certainly much bigger than 1. And when we have the ratio test, and we take our ratio of the absolute value of a sub n plus 1 over the absolute value of a sub n, and I get something bigger than 1, then my conclusion is that the series that we have, summation from n equals 1 to infinity, negative 1 to the n times 2n factorial over n factorial 2 to the n, diverges by the ratio test. And I'm done with the problem.